Hey, you might want to get excited. I know the news has a tendency to sort of lean into gloom, and especially when, someone from Team Reddit's in power, it's going to be disaster all day, every day for most of the media outlets. But let me tell you a little bit about what's going on in the background that actually affects your money right now. And it's funny that this is in the background because this is kind of stuff that should be in the foreground. The market's up today, right? So the market's up, NASDAQ's up almost 3%. Dow's up over 1%. S&P's up as well. It's been a pretty good week. It didn't start off that good, but the last couple of days have been fantastic. And so let me tell you a couple other things that you would be interested to find out about your market. Is that last week was actually the Dow Jones and S&P posted their best week since 2023. Did you hear that anywhere else? I mean, I did, but I try and keep an eye on Fox Business while I'm in the studio. But did you hear that? ABC, NBC, CBS, did they fall all over themselves to tell you the fantastic news about the giant rebound that happened last week in the stock market? And it's up for this week. Well, it's not up by much, but it's up in the last 2 days, a fantastic amount. But in last week, the S&P rose 2%, NASDAQ 2%, Dow 1.5%. That was their best week since 2023. You understand, for all of 2024, we didn't have that good of a week in the stock market. Pretty good news, huh? Now, seriously, how many headlines did you see throwing that in your face? If you saw zero, then you need to find better news sources. So, when you go dig into the other economic news that's happening right now, gold's at a record high, 10-year treasury's up a little bit. You don't have to know how that affects your money, but just know that you are going to get a fire hose of economic news when it's bad, and it's going to be largely ignored when it's good. Just throwing that out there. And the reason I'm doing this and just showing this pattern as a little bit of context for my first actual real story, it's this survey. And this survey's got me scratching my head because it says 53% of Republicans would not support Donald Trump if he tried to run for a third term. I want to talk to the other 47%. Explain that. You think you're cool with that? You would just want to go ahead and let him take a third term? 800-288-9227. I understand that it's in the Constitution, and maybe they would have to find out some legal loophole around it, or maybe repeal an amendment, pass another amendment to repeal the previous amendment that put the term limits on there. I also realize that there's the constitutional originalist case, that if the founding fathers didn't put term limits in the Constitution, it wasn't because they didn't think of them. It's not like they're a bunch of thoughtless hacks who go, term limits, we didn't even think about that. No, they didn't put it in there because they didn't want you to have term limits. And then you turn around and you saw a bunch of people who were founding fathers who were at either the Declaration or more likely the Constitutional Convention that did make a career out of politics after that. So not only were they not against it legally speaking when they put pen to paper, but they lived it. So, okay. Let's go ahead and have that conversation then. Term limits aren't inherently against the Constitution as it was originally written or the Founding Fathers' intent. So are we really hurting ourselves by putting these shackles on us? Should we get rid of the amendment that limits the president to 2 terms? This is the discussion we have to have. And I want it to be that discussion. I don't want it to be whether or not Trump is good or bad, or whether or not he's literally Hitler. If you are very pro-Trump and that's why you like this, I'm going to disregard your argument. If you're very anti-Trump and that's why you don't like this, I'm going to disregard your argument. Take the human element out of it and make the case based on what you think the founding fathers would do if they were in 2025 right now. 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. I think if this happened in a vacuum, and the fact that all other variables were the same, but you brought the founding fathers to 2025 and they looked around, they might be okay with him running for a third term. They might be okay with him, just saying, I know we're not used to this and we're going to have to pass an amendment, but let's go ahead and get that amendment passed. And as long as you do it the right way, I'm not sure if the founding fathers would necessarily be philosophically against it. However, when they come to 2025, it's not going to be in a vacuum. They're going to run around. They're going to ask, what is the Department of Education? We didn't say in the Constitution that the Congress would have any control over what happens in the schools in your communities all across the continent. What is this Department of Health and Human Services? What is this? You're not supposed to be making medical decisions. Oh, but we're funding cancer research. You're not supposed to be funding cancer research. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress about 23 things that they're actually supposed to do, and all this other stuff that we've made up outside of it, the Medicare, the Medicaid, Social Security, all that. I don't think the Founding Fathers would be cool with that. I think they would all look at each other and be like, yeah, this is not what we had in mind. This is far beyond the scope of what we envision the federal government to be. And so I don't think they would like having some guy calcified into power with a government this big and the one that's this unconstitutional. But what do you think? Should we let a president have a third term, or at least attempt a third term, whether it's Trump or not? 800-288-9227. I want to ask you that. We'll get some answers. And that'll be the first thing I ask my next guest, Raven Harrison, who's coming up on the James Show. But I want to hear from you too. 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. A new poll shows 53% of Republicans oppose a Trump third term. Who are these other 47%? I think it's a bad idea, and I think the Founding Fathers would agree with me, but got to admit, not 100% sure on that. I don't think they would be cool with that. My next guest, Raven Harrison, let me start with you with that same question. How do you feel about the idea of a Trump third term? 53% of Republicans oppose it. What say Raven Harrison?
Well, I would normally say absolutely 3, 4, 5, but again, that's where it gets to be the gray area because the Constitution says 2 consecutive terms. And I really don't want to make that about where it is now. So I would say that probably erring on the side of not doing that just because we want to keep the continuity. We don't want to set up a precedent for that, especially for the left.
Well, I think they were tempted to do the same thing when Obama was done with his second term. Like, can't we get another one? But if Trump comes back, I think we run that risk. Well, won't they just run Obama again? And oh no, the thing that you use to help yourself can be used against you. Correct.
So that is one of those, do you have the right to remain silent, but do you have the capacity? So
Love it.
I think we should probably keep it where it is. So at least that's the only check and balance that seems to be working at this point.
Well, I also would like to revisit this conversation at the end of this term because there's a lot of people who feel sort of protective about him. But after, 3, maybe 4 more years of just constant negative news, I don't think we'll have to worry about it. I mean, it doesn't matter how good a president does. They just always get beat down by the media if they're on Team Red.
And I'm telling you, Trump more so than anyone, he is right when he said in the State of the Union, there's nothing I could do to make these people happy. It is just if he walked on water, they would say he couldn't swim. If he cured cancer, they would say they have the right to die of cancer. I mean, we're just in that mentality now. So I would say with that, and then also what age would he be? That opens it up to how old is too old. And I just feel like for right now, even though I really kind of dread what's going to be after President Trump, we still have to kind of do this the way it was envisioned. It was supposed to be to control power. But the problem we don't have is we can't even see what a full Trump term looks like because we can't get this sellout, do-nothing career politicians, to get off the stick and do something.
Well, haven't you enjoyed the string of Democrats that have gone to El Salvador to try and get this MS-13 guy back? That's not going to help their cause very much in the midterms.
I'm absolutely thrilled that this is the hill they chose to die on, is going down to El Salvador to tell the El Salvadorian president how to run his country and what to do with one of his citizens. And they keep squawking about this. The Supreme Court. You mean the same Supreme Court that Biden gave the middle finger to and said he was going to continue with student loan forgiveness? I mean, it is just, you can't make this up, James. It is crazy how the hypocrisy of this, of them fighting for a guy who was not citizen. 2 courts said he's an MS gang member. He's got tattoos on his knuckle. And yet this is who they are lobbying and spending taxpayer money to go rally behind. Sickening.
Well, look, maybe they're just real strict originalists when it comes to due process, Raven. I mean, just forget all the restrictions during COVID and whatnot. They're just really interested in the constitutional rights of their fellow man.
But again, what is the Constitution of El Salvador? He is not a citizen of America. And I feel like it's important to make that distinction to people. The Constitution is a protection and a guarantor for American citizens, not for residents, not for people here on student visas. So due process applies to citizens. It does not apply to people who have been in our country illegally for 12 years. And they're like, well, why didn't Trump deport him? He did. And then why didn't Obama deport him? He's not supposed to be here. But at the end of the day, this is the Democrats, again, forgetting who they serve. They're out there rallying in El Salvador. Who's paying for these trips to go down there? Don't they have any problems in their states that need attention to where they have time to go down to El Salvador? But we've got it on our side, too. You know, we've got ones from Republicans now going down there. You know what? Get your butt up to Washington and do your freaking job.
Well, we have a pattern going on along a lot of our headlines right now where the Democrats choose the gangbangers, you know, to support them versus the victims of the illegal immigrant gangbangers who have already, you know, caused mayhem in their own districts. They choose with the Palestinians who attacked the music festival on October 7th and took a bunch of hostages and got a little rapey over the Israelis. They chose the Trayvon Martin over George Floyd. I mean, they just do it over and over and over, keep choosing the wrong side. I'm surprised they do as well as they do in elections.
Well, they do it because they appeal to the young. We call them missiles with no guidance system, people who are passionate, and there's nothing wrong with being passionate. But without context, you get obsessed. You get firebombing of Teslas. Remember, everybody had to go buy a Tesla. And now, you know, they've got gas guzzlers. So now you haven't heard one word about climate change since they decided they don't like Elon anymore. They have got no platform, no anything. And the fact that they're trying to apply American laws to foreign illegals is just, they haven't learned anything. And now they're talking about an AOC Crockett ticket for 2028. I mean,
Raven,
you gotta be kidding me.
No, Raven, that's their best chance. And in fact, if I was there, if they were paying me to give them advice, my honest advice would be AOC and Jasmine Crockett on the ticket.
They can absolutely, again, that is going to be the best money grab. It'll make both of them wealthy beyond their dreams, and it will be an absolute, that will be the rest in peace white flag for the Democrat Party. And they know it. But again, that's all they can do is sensationalize. And until we start seeing perp walks, preferably on pay-per-view, this is going to continue until we start mailing out spines to the Republicans in there. No career politicians. This is why. Because they're not there to solve problems. They created most of these problems. So we have to get serious, and that's why, guys, keep the phones lit up. Stay all over these people. Not a minute of quarter until they do their job.
Raven Harrison, how do we find your work online?
You can find me at RavenHarrisonForCongress.com. And, James, you always know where to find me. I'm always close.
Thank you very much. There she is, Raven. Pulls no punches, so she's always welcome on the James Show. What say you? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. You heard my thoughts on a Trump third term? No. You heard Raven's thoughts? Maybe, but still no. What's yours? We're talking about this survey that says 53% of Republicans oppose a Trump third term. We just talked with Raven Harrison about it. I gave you my thoughts on it, which I'm a no. But I do have some exceptions. David heard something that I think a lot of us heard in the conversation with Raven. He sent me a Facebook message saying, if you go by what Raven just said, a president can't serve 2 consecutive terms or more than 2 consecutive terms. Trump hasn't served 2 consecutive terms if that's what it says he can run. Well, she was wrong. That's not what it says. It doesn't specify anything different with whether they're consecutive or not. And I just double checked it. I went to look at the text of the Constitution. Here it is. Amendment 22, ratified in 1951, yada, yada. So, yeah, my exceptions would be is if government was the size it was supposed to be, if it was within its constitutional bounds as the founding fathers envisioned, which meant none of these social programs, none of this government charity, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, unemployment, all that stuff taken out of there. Department of Health and Human Services gone. Department of Education gone. Just strip it down to what it was supposed to do. There's 23 things listed in Article 1, Section 8. If it was down to that, I would be a solid maybe. But we are nowhere close to that now, are we? 800-288-9227. We're starting with Tom and Sherman. What do you think about a Trump third term, Tom?
Usually I'd be against 3 terms. I think that everybody should that's an elected official should have term limits to keep from what's going on in Washington. The only exception I would have is if they wasn't consecutive. In other words, kind of like Trump this time, where he was elected, somebody else got elected, he got reelected. I feel that it takes 8 years to get meaningful change, to sustain it, and to do that. And that would be the only time that I would consider that somebody ought to get a third term, but they better make sure that they can get that person elected, because otherwise you're giving away an election.
Well, that means Obama can run again. Does that change your mind any?
Well, that it would. But that would be the only way that I think that it should even be considered.
All right. Thank you very much for calling in, Tom. See, this is exactly what I wanted to talk about. TW on Facebook says, no to a third term because I want a Democrat to be in office for a third term. I know. Whatever power you give your guy can be used by the other guy next time around. This is Mac in Dallas. What do you think?
Yeah.
Hey, Mac, go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think FDR was the last one that did 3 terms or more.
Only one, yeah.
Yeah. So when you go fast forward to Trump, I think we've got to be careful what we wish for. Right now, I mean, he's great, but how we get Trump to stay in office is we have to go for whoever he nominates for the next president, because he's not going to leave us hanging out to dry because of the term limits by the Constitution. He's going to make sure and ensure that the American people are going to have a government that still supports his agenda throughout the next 8 years, because that next president will have 8 years. So realistically, I feel like we'll have 12 years. But you got to keep the Constitution the Constitution. I mean, it is what it is.
Well, it wasn't in the Constitution until the 50s. So, if you're looking at an originalist argument, maybe you would be against term limits, because the founding fathers didn't write in term limits for anybody.
Yeah, but again, you'd have to go back and look what happened with FDR, why it got changed.
Yeah, so, agreed. And I'm also, I think a lot of people are hesitant for the third term because that's how so many of these dictators get into power. You know, Putin was elected and then he was reelected, and then he was term limited out. So he had to have his stooge Medvedev come in for a term. And then they just got rid of the whole facade. And they're like, you know what? We're not doing term limits anymore. And now Putin wins elections hugely. Same thing that happened with Hugo Chavez down in Venezuela. No, I'm an elected guy. And then after he's in power for a couple times, I'm not a dictator. I'm just going to keep getting reelected over and over and over and over. And so a lot of people see that as an easy substitution for a dictatorship.
Right. But like I said, once Trump's term is up, we all have to go back to the voting booth, and we need to make sure we keep electing conservative people.
Right, and that's the right advice, Mac. We wouldn't have to worry about this if voters were a little more on the ball. Thank you very much, Mac. George Manfield, you're on WBAP. What do you think about a Trump third term?
No way. I want 2 terms for the president, 2 terms, 6 years, 12 years total for the senators, 6 terms, 12 years for the congressmen, and then I want them all to go home and live and work in the laws that they passed.
Well, I am actually not in favor of having congressional term limits. And the reason I give, and you probably won't agree with me even after I give them, but let me try here, George, is the fact that if you have these people cycle out that fast, then the people who are really going to be in positions of power is the bureaucrats who are, holding the office seat, the chiefs of staffs and the other lobbyists and the people who give the orientation and the rules department and the parliamentarian people like that. And it would be the deep state. The deep state would be the calcified interests that the lobbyists would go for, because the guy that's in power, he's just going to be rotated out in 2 to 4 years anyway. So you really just need to buy out off the chief of staff or whoever's running that air quote office.
Well, they're cycled out now every 2 years, but we just keep voting these idiots back in. And if you can make it where the Congress can only have 6 terms, 12 years, then they're not meant to be there forever. And we get the thing about Americans, and I'm the same way, and that is we get used to the same thing over and over. You wear the same clothes, you wear the same color of clothes every day, the same color of blue jeans, the same pair of shoes we get used to that. and we have to break this cycle. And we can fix it where there's no lobbyists there that can't be sucked into this. We need to get rid of so many of the different the education department and strip this down, because you sit back and think we more or less babysit the world, and we don't get hardly anything back for it. And it's because we do not get these people, let them come. But then when they go home and they have to live and work in the laws that they passed, then that's when things change. Because these people here's the deal, James, before you go, I got to go.
Okay.
And the thing is, they go to office broke, and they come out multi-millionaires, literally every one of them. Tell me why this is.
I will after the break. I will, because I think I have an explanation for you that means term limits wouldn't be the solution. But yeah, the idea of career politicians, I don't think that's inherently bad. I think it's often bad in practice, and it's a sign that things aren't going to get better anytime soon. However, I'll make the case that the Founding Fathers would be okay with congressmen who go in there for the rest of their lives if they do the right thing. And how about Henry and McKinney? Would you be okay with a Trump third term?
Well, if we brought back true oversight by we the people, I don't think it would matter what the term limits were, which would entail bringing back the fact that...
Did I lose him?
Oh, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. What happened?
Something happened. I don't know what that was.
All right. Well, your phone's not very reliable. Let me move on then. Brent, Lake Weatherford, your thoughts on Trump's third term?
Well, James, you said two different things earlier. He said you could get Obama back. What I'm talking about, he did 4 years. He's out. Now, I think he could do 8 years. That's my take on it. You know, if it's not once it's consecutive, he's out. But he did 4 years. He gets reelected. Yeah, I think we ought to make an allowance. I don't care which side of the fence it is.
Okay, but they don't have that language in the Constitution, the consecutive part. But you're okay with it.
You asked me what I thought. I'm just telling you what I think. Yeah.
You're not worried about it being used against us for some Democrat in the future?
Well, that's the way it is. That's the way it is. We've got to have it equal for both parties.
So why would you be willing to change the rules for Trump?
I'm not saying for Trump. I'm just saying anyone that's elected for 4 years, then he gets, he's out. Then he could serve two consecutive 8 year, two 4 year terms, 8 years, and then he couldn't serve again. That's all I'm saying.
I see.
Whoever it is.
Well, you're the first person who's drawn the lines like that. Thank you, Brent. Appreciate it.
All right, bud. Bye.
Steve Weatherford, you're on WBAP. What do you think about a Trump third term?
3 quick points.
Okay.
No to a third term for anybody. Term limits for senators and representatives, 8 years, and you go back home and live in any mess you made while you were a senator or a congressman or a president. Comply with the laws that they ask us to. And the third point would be this. I think the Democratic Party is so bankrupt, they're not even going to be able to mount a credible challenge for another 12 years.
I mean,
they are bankrupt.
We have said this before, and then they came out with Obama. This is what we said after 2004, the John Kerry and Joe Lieberman ticket. I mean, what a dud that was. And then after that, they didn't have a bench. They were like, what are we supposed to do now? Run Hillary Clinton? And back then that was a laughable measure. It's like, oh, come on. We just gave her the New York senator seat to keep her happy or whatever. But
so here's the reason I think they're bankrupt ideal politically for the next 12 years. We are right now, as of today, as of November of last year and going forward, you're seeing an American reculturing.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Keep going.
Well, I mean, we lived through 4 years of immature people running Washington, D.C. under Biden. It's like children were running the country. Now we have adults in power again. And I think that America, we got pushed so far to the left. It started with the Clintons. Yellow Dog, Texas Democrats were very conservative, Bible-carrying, gun-toting conservative. But the Clintons took the party to the left, and it's just gone further left since then, including AOC and Jasmine Crockett, which are two of the biggest clowns I've ever heard of. So I think
that's your front runners for 2028, though.
Well, I hope they do, because that's a sure loss. Those two clowns guarantee that the Democrats come up short for 28. But America's going through a reculturing. They pushed too far to the left. Now the pendulum is swinging back to the center of common sense.
Now that I agree with. All right, Stephen Weatherford. And I find it so amusing that the people who seem to be the most likely people on the ticket for 2028, the other party is welcoming with open arms. Please, God, run them. Can we please face those guys? And God, it's just 3 years away. We're going to start primarying this stuff out in 2 years. Get ready. We're going to have to go through it all again. All right, Brandon in Plano, your thoughts on a Trump third term?
J.D. Vance president, Trump vice president. Problem solved.
I don't think he's eligible. You can't be the VP on the ticket if you're not eligible to be president.
Didn't H.W., wasn't he VP for 8 years, then president for 4 years?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're not eligible to run for president, you're not eligible to be vice president. It's not that it counts toward your terms.
I've never heard of that.
Okay.
Is that in the Constitution?
Yeah, it's in the Constitution.
Oh, well, I guess that solves that problem then.
It does. No, and I don't mind you calling in. I don't expect you to hear all the shows where we've talked about this before. I know I sound like a smarty pants, but I didn't know that when we first started talking about this last year. I had to look it up and Google it, and I just remembered it this time. So I was where you were just a few months ago, so don't feel bad, Brandon.
Yeah, and all these judges are not in the Constitution either. So, I mean, we're kind of in some uncharted territory.
Well, it does give them the power to create the judiciary, the Supreme Court, and then as needed, there's a very vague clause where a supporting court system under it. So, yeah, all these judges, I don't think are what the Founding Fathers had in mind. But the Constitution's vague enough in that it's constitutional that they've created too many courts. I don't think the solution is to get rid of all the judges or the extra judges. It's to get rid of the extra laws that the judges are needed to adjudicate. I mean, how many fewer judges would we need if we ended drug prohibition? We'd probably cut our need for judges by like 2/3. Narcely and Kaufman, you're on WBAP. What do you think about a Trump third term?
Okay, well, here's my take on it, and thank you for taking my call. This is the first time that I've ever spoken out publicly. But my deal is this. Trump is a businessman, and don't we start our Constitution as we the people, which means if we feel that he is confident enough to run our government, because the United States is like a business. You know what I'm saying? He can't be bought off politically. He can't, I don't follow all this. My husband is the freedom fighter, not me, but I listen to him. But anyway, my deal is this. As long as the people have confidence in him, as long as the people vote for him, as long as that's what the people want, it doesn't have anything really, like terms.
See, now, Narcely, you sound like me when I'm talking about congressmen and senators and even governors and state reps and things of that nature. The only thing we have straying from the Founding Fathers is the fact that George Washington, one of the Founding Fathers, voluntarily set the precedent of 2 terms and then walk away like a gentleman. There didn't need to be a law or a rule or a constitutional amendment. I think we were just assumed to all abide by that unless it was an emergency situation. So there's a little gray area there, Narcely. But as it stands right now, not legal. But I like where your head's at. As long as the voters want him, term limits are now thwarting the will of the people. I'm James Parker. That's next on The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.